Right, we've got ProFlares installed in our new project. I just want to run through how to get it set up in a brand new empty scene. So first of all, you need to come up to Pro Window and then come down to ProFlares. The first option you need to go for is this Create Setup. And what this does is it creates a few different game objects. I'll just run you through. And the first one is just a kind of a root object, allows you to move it around the scene and doesn't actually affect much, but it's just kind of allows you to sort of move it without breaking anything. The second is a camera, and this is an orthographic camera, and this is what actually renders our flares, which you'll see in a minute. Secondly, we have this ProFlare batch. This is the script and the mesh renderer, which actually generates the flares for the ProFlare camera to render. The next thing you need to do is plug in an atlas, because every ProFlare batch uses an atlas. So I'm going to plug in the Mega Atlas, which comes with ProFlares. I drag and drop it, it connects everything up, and you're pretty much good to go. Just a quick look, the Mega Atlas contains tons of different elements. It's quite versatile, so allows you to create quite a lot of different style effects. Also, built quite a lot of presets using it. So we've got the ProFlares set up in the scene. I'm just going to quickly put a few objects in the scene to give us some points of reference. So let's have a plane. Let's say a sphere and a light. I'm going to drag in one of the preset flares, and you can see everything's instantly connected and allows the flare to be rendered. You can see there's probably a small problem, is that the flare is getting rendered twice. This is because the main camera can actually see and is being rendering the ProFlare setup. So if we zoom in, you can see there's some geometry down here, which is actually the geometry that's being rendered by the ProFlare camera. All we need to do is set up a layer mask that stops the camera from rendering this geometry. So you'll also notice that the layer of the ProFlare batch is blank. This is because it uses layer 8 by default, and because this is a new project, that layer's not yet been named. So if I just pop in here and call this whatever you want, I'm going to call it flares, and then pop over to my main camera and color mask. I can turn off flares, and you'll notice that as soon as I do that, the flares are rendered correctly and not twice. So you can see I can move the camera around and I'm not seeing any extra flares. Right, we've got one flare in our scene now. One of the great powerful things about ProFlares is that you can create multiple flares with just one draw call. Only slight caveats with that is as long as they use the same texture atlas, flare atlas. So as many as I duplicate of these flares, you can see that every time I duplicate one, my draw calls don't go up. Still I'm free for obviously the few bits and pieces I've got in the scene. I'm going to go through and just delete these ones. And again, you can do exactly the same with different presets. These all use the Mega Atlas because they're under the Mega Atlas folder. Let's have a closer look on how this is all connected. Because we dragged in the preset, our flare atlas has already been defined, and you can see that this flare is connected to the Mega Atlas ProFlare batch. If we hit select, we'll select over to our ProFlare batch, and you can also see that you've got a list of all the different flares that this current ProFlare batch is rendering, and we can select either one of those as well, so we can go backwards and forwards between the two. So I just want to quickly show you guys what would happen if we were to say drag in a preset that wasn't using the Mega Atlas. So I drag this element in, onto scene, you'll notice that we get no flares attached. And you can also see that this current flare is using the basic atlas, and you've got no ProFlare batches that are currently rendering it. So to render that, we need a ProFlare batch that would be rendering using the basic atlas. So we could always change the ProFlare batch we've currently got into our scene to use the ProFlare, to use the basic atlas. So if I was to drag and drop that in there, you can now see we've got the new flare that we added into scene, but we have lost all of the old ones. So we could obviously switch back to the Mega Atlas, but then we would lose the new flare we've added. But we can always use multiple ProFlare batches. And how you go about doing that is to select the ProFlare camera, and then go to Window, and go down to Create Setup on Selected Camera. And what this will do is it'll create another ProFlare batch, but be wired up to use the same camera, so you don't have to have multiple setups, like a complete setup. And now we can obviously drag in the Mega Atlas, and as soon as you've done that, it rewires everything back up, and you have the different flares within the scene all working. You will notice that we've now got 4 draw calls. That's because we're using 2 separate atlases. So every atlas you use, you get an additional draw call. That basically covers all the fundamentals of getting ProFlares set up in a simple scene with a few of the preset flares.